Cool. So we don't need. Do we not need these?
I guess not. I don't know who those are.
But your mic is working also.
Yeah, we have a converter.
Yeah. You want me to stand here for a second? Yeah, you got it. No worries.
Bobby for Congress 2024.
I gotta get married first.
Yeah. Okay.
I got some other things to accomplish. Yeah. Test run.
Boom, boom, boom. They took out the tape.
Space out.
Yeah, how do you know? How do you know to social distance if there's no tape on the ground? I don't see how that works. Okay, this is I don't know. Here was. Okay, there's a little mic here. I just don't want to. Is that fine right there? Okay. Thank you, everyone, for being here. My name is Andy Biggs, Arizona's 5th Congressional District, Chairman of the House Freedom Caucus. I'm joined today with some of our Freedom Caucus members. We're glad that you'd be here. First of all, we thank our police force, most of whom just do an outstanding job. There are a few that don't, but most do a great job. We are grateful to them. They help provide law and order. They help allow us to be free. They help us actualize our constitutional rights, or our God-given rights, memorialized and enshrined in the Constitution of the United States. First of all, I will tell you that our constituents and across America, we are hearing from people who want this mayhem, these riots, this lawlessness to stop. They want it to stop yesterday. We have long ago left the constitutionally protected peaceful protests. We have now moved through weeks of revolutionary upheaval. This movement to defund or eliminate our police forces is wrong-headed, and you're seeing the results of police, what happens when police are rendered moot and inactive. Rioting, looting, and now mindless, aimless attacks on monuments, statues, and works of art. This is nothing less than mobocracy. The attempt is to sanitize the symbols of our history, which are being destroyed by those who do not understand or know our history. President Trump has rightly reminded us of the Veterans Monument Law, 18 U.S.C. Section 1369. There are remedies available. Federal law enforcement needs to make arrests. They need to be actively arresting those who are violating federal law. Our U.S. attorneys need to be prosecuting cases. I'm going to give you some laws right now which I think are applicable. First of all, we can look at RICO. The racketeering laws apply to many in this case. What we can do in Congress is we can eliminate federal funding for states or local jurisdictions that are protecting the mobs. They're allowing anarchists to take over their streets, threaten people, and violate the rights of their citizens. We can eliminate funding for jurisdictions who have been emptying their jails of violent criminals and putting them on the streets. We can provide incentives for jurisdictions that prosecute repeat offenders who are particularly violent, that we know are violent. We can address the court cases that have emasculated the prohibition and prosecution of those carrying firearms during a commission of a violent federal crime. We can acknowledge the necessity of federal intervention when states and local jurisdictions allow the rights of their citizens, the public property to be violated, the public property to be attacked, vandalized, and destroyed. The President has correctly observed that these riots and criminal vandals are domestic terrorists indeed. 18 U.S.C. 2339 would allow for prosecution of those individuals. We're here today to call on Director Wray and other federal law enforcement agencies to immediately begin making arrests of those who are attempting to violate rights and disturb our peace and vandalize our federal property and attacking our private property. We call on Attorney General Barr to charge those who are arrested and vigorously and immediately prosecute them. And we believe in so doing, we can restore peace and order to this country. We're thankful for the leadership our president has given on this issue. I'm grateful for my friends in the Freedom Caucus. And now I'm going to throw this to the gentleman from Texas who does a great job and is working hard on this for his comments, Mr. Chip Roy.
Well, I thank my friend Andy and all my friends here in the Freedom Caucus. Today's an important day. We need to put in perspective right now what's really going on in the United States of America. This last weekend, we had 104 individuals who were shot in Chicago. One of the all-time highs in the history of our country, what's going on. We had 14 people killed, teenagers killed, a 3-year-old little boy who was killed in Chicago, a 324% increase in murders and shootings in New York City. We had a guy that was actually killed in the back of the head in broad daylight in Brooklyn, in New York, in America today. We've got statues being toppled. We have 3 people getting killed in a so-called autonomous zone in Seattle. We've got a 65-year-old state senator who happens to be gay getting beat in the state of Wisconsin. This is not what order looks like. You don't have liberty if you don't have order, and it is time for the federal government to do its job and enforce the laws of the United States. We have federal laws on the books that prohibit the kind of vandalism that is attacking our memorials. We have federal laws on the books that prohibit the kind of vandalism on our churches that we saw at St. John's Church just a few blocks from here and 2 blocks from the White House. And we have laws on the books that prohibit organized crime. The kind of organized crime that we're seeing from BLM, who are saying that this country should be burned down if we don't adhere to every one of their demands. We are seeing organized crime in the hands of Antifa, who are organizing efforts around the United States and organizing this activity that is causing criminal behavior, resulting in the loss of life in the United States. This is not what we're standing for here in Congress. And where is Congress? What is Congress doing? Standing here in front of the House of Representatives, the people's house. And what are we doing? The Speaker of the House is taking shots at Senator Tim Scott for standing up and trying to pass legislation being blocked by Senate Democrats when he offered 20 amendments and they wouldn't even sit down and vote on amendments. It is absolutely appalling what the Speaker of the House is doing, turning this body upside down on its head, not allowing us to do our job and be on the floor of the House debating and offering amendments. We should be standing up in the memory of George Floyd, standing up for liberty. We should have a debate and a vote on things like qualified immunity. Let's have it out. Let's have a debate about what those things look like. Let's have a debate about no-knock warrants. Let's have a debate about the kinds of things that we, as freedom lovers, all have concerns about, while also standing alongside the 99% of law enforcement that are out there protecting us every single day in that thin blue line. It is time for the federal government to do their job. It is time for the Attorney General of the United States and the head of the FBI and the president should direct them to enforce the laws of the United States to keep the American people secure in their liberties, to secure the blessings of liberty that our Constitution calls for. With that, I'm going to turn it over to my friend, Mr. Heiss from Georgia.
I am grateful for Chip and Andy and my fellow colleagues in the Freedom Caucus for tremendous leadership in this. Look, the reason we're here is because we are all watching all across this country radical activists literally rampage our cities, our communities all across our country. And the tragic death of George Floyd literally is being hijacked by these radicals right now, by Antifa and BLM and other organizations who are coming in, and quite frankly, these protests are turning now into riots, turning into mob rule. We're watching personal property destroyed, burned, vandalism. We're seeing all sorts of destructive activity take place. And all the while, the Dems are over here, the Democrats are wanting to defund the police, and they're jumping behind an insane movement to defund the police and law enforcement all across our country. And we look at what's happening in Seattle. As Chip just mentioned a while ago, the attempt even was right here in Washington, D.C. These autonomous zones, what's taking place, and as these individuals are allowed to keep doing what they're doing, it is going to continue, and it's going to continue to get worse. And now we're watching the transition of monuments and statues, our national monuments, churches, all these types of things now are under attack. In fact, one of their national leaders just the other day gave instruction for any statue or image of Jesus, if it is a white Jesus, to destroy it. I mean, this is gaining momentum while we're sitting back doing absolutely nothing. And it's time for all of this to stop. It's a direct campaign, an attack against our shared heritage and the things that we treasure, our institutions and our liberty here in this country. And we're here to say enough is enough. It's time for Attorney General Barr to step up and start prosecuting hundreds, perhaps thousands of individuals who are continuing to break the law. And it's time for us here in Congress to start holding individual leaders of states and cities who are doing absolutely nothing while all this rampage is taking place. It's time that we start holding them accountable. And quite frankly, we should consider, while they're trying to defund the police, we ought to start considering defunding some of these cities, some of these places who are receiving over and over and over federal dollars. Enough is enough, and we're here to take a stand. Our constituents are ticked off. We're ticked off. It's time for all of this nonsense to come to a stop. and we're here to do all we can to do just that. I'm not sure exactly who's following me, but I'll turn it over.
Thank you. I thank Chip and I thank Jody. And the way we're going to go now is Representative Gomer from Texas, followed by Representative Perry from Pennsylvania, and then Representative Posey from Florida, and then we'll take a few questions.
Thanks, Andy and Jody. Thank you for being here. This is a very critical time. While this Marxist crime wave is underway, you've got Democratic leaders wanting to play games. Of course, it's understandable if they don't know their history. These kind of insurrections can start small and be legitimate, as were the peaceful protests over the death of George Floyd, but you have groups that are Marxist-backed that know their history, despite the miseducation on history for so many Americans. They know how the Bolshevik Revolution happened and became successful. It was small, and they took advantage of some unhappiness, but even then, it was capable of being stopped if good people had stepped up and stopped it. But the good people back then, including the military that Trotsky talked out of coming over and stopping it, they thought, well, maybe this system of government they're talking about could be a nice thing. Share and share alike, but it always goes the same way, as it did in Venezuela, Soviet Union, China. You have a little bitty ruling class, and then you've got everybody else. There's no chance to work your way up. As I was told by a Soviet college friend when I was an exchange student over there, they said, in America, you've got a chance to work your way up, earning money and work your way up to success. In our country, in any communist country, there's only one way to work your way up, and that's to step on other people on the way up. And while we should have people in this House on both sides of the aisle, not just one, who step up and say this craziness has got to stop, you get the feeling that they're hoping that this craziness will go through November because maybe it'll hurt Donald Trump. You got to care more about the country and the generations to come than we're seeing in the leadership in the House right now. Now, I understand when people don't know their history, but this has got to be stopped, and we've got to have leadership that says, stop already. And that doesn't mean leaders that are arbitrary and capricious and actually downright mean-spirited in enforcing their own rules. It's people that say, we all care about the country, let's work together to stop it. Not how can we continue to keep the economy shut down, people losing jobs, violence going on, so we can hurt Donald Trump in November. We got to come together and stop this, and I thank God that Donald Trump is our president because he understands this. And he understands no matter what people think of him, he wants to save this country for future generations. And that's what everybody standing here wants to do, and I'm proud to be here with them. Thank you.
I'm proud to stand here with my colleagues. Ladies and gentlemen, it's easy and plain to see. Our house is on fire. What do you get when you have a 2-alarm fire in your house and you don't do anything? Well, then you get a 5-alarm fire, and pretty soon your house is gone. It's way past time. We understand peaceful protest, and every person standing here supports the Constitution. But peaceful protest does not mean loss of life, rioting, and destruction of public property. There's a process for this. There's a process in place. If you don't like the symbols of the past, there's a process here, but the process doesn't include tearing them down because you don't like them. Ladies and gentlemen, citizens across the country are watching their TVs every night, and they can see the faces of these people, and their mouths are agape. They are appalled. How is this happening and there's no accountability? This lawlessness, how is this happening in our country? Today, I'm with my colleagues. We call on our leadership at the FBI, at the Department of Justice, in the halls of Congress under Nancy Pelosi, under the Speaker, This must end. Peaceful protesting, absolutely. The right to address grievances to your government peacefully, totally appropriate. But hijacking that effort and the good, well-meaning thoughts of those folks is not appropriate. It must stop, and it must stop now. And I yield to my good friend from Florida, Mr. Posey.
Don't know how many of you are familiar with honor flight. Anybody here familiar with honor flight? Yeah, good. We have some people familiar with honor flight. Honor flight was begun to take World War II veterans, the greatest generation of heroes, to see their memorial in Washington, D.C., which they paid for, by the way. The government didn't pay for that memorial. I remember going through my father's things after he died and all these little $25 receipts when $25 was a lot of money. Thank you for your donation, Mr. Posey, for this memorial. I've been to 50 honor flights, and our World War II guys are dying off so much now. Instead of having 24 of them, now we're down to 3 or 4 of them per flight, and we're getting the Korean veterans and the Vietnam veterans and the Middle Eastern war veterans. But if it didn't make you sick in your stomach to see the World War II memorial vandalized and desecrated, I really have to question your parentage or your love for this country. The Marxists and the anarchists have a right to peacefully demonstrate until the cows come home if they want to. But they don't have the right to destroy public property, your property, my property, every American's property. And they must be held accountable. And I'm calling on Speaker Pelosi and Minority Leader Schumer to stand up and say something about it. They've been totally absent without leave. They've made no comment, no condemnation of this terrible, irrational behavior that's injured people and damaged property. It's my honor now to introduce Congressman Fulcher.
Thank you to my friends of the Freedom Caucus and to all of you. I just wanted to point out something that came as a result of about 10 minutes worth of homework. In order to understand the situation, look no further than the targets of these so-called protesters. Defaced, toppled in Boston, the 54th Union Army Regiment Monument. This was a monument dedicated to black soldiers, to the first all-volunteer black regiment. Also defaced, toppled in Madison, Wisconsin, the monument to Hans Christian Heg, abolitionist, somebody who opposed slavery, who led a militia against the slave catchers. I can go on. Matthias Baldwin, Philadelphia. He fought against slavery and the right of black Americans to vote, used his own money to educate black children. There's 20 of these, and that's in about a 10-minute search. This is no longer about Mr. Floyd. This is no longer about equal rights. This is about criminal, mob rule, anarchist type lawlessness. Plain and simple. The rule of law is at risk here, and without that, you don't have prosperity. I have been to plenty of places where there's no rule of law, and nobody wants that. So we do call on the Attorney General, authorities in place, to act on this. Lawlessness is just bad all the way around. With that, I turn it over to my colleague, Representative DeJarlais. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you all for being here, and thank the Freedom Caucus for all the great words that have already been said today. I'm proud to be here representing the great state of Tennessee today. And to the peaceful protesters, yes, you absolutely have a right to protest and be heard. But to the criminals, the looters, the vandals, no, we need our law enforcement to step up. We love our police, we respect our police, and we urge you to hang in there. You've been going through a real trying time. We know you don't want bad actors among you. We know we're all working together to root that out. But we need to let the police do their job. The most common call we're getting into our district offices in Tennessee and our office in Washington right now is about the vandalism and the lawlessness that's going on in this country. And we're here today to say we've had enough. Like my colleagues, I urge Director Wray, FBI, the police forces, the mayors, the governors, to let the police do their job. The people want this stopped. You cannot erase history, you have to learn from it. And I'd like now to introduce another great representative from the state of Arizona, Dr. Paul Gosar.
Thanks, everybody. What a sad day. What a sad time we find ourselves. an opportunity to bring this country together is wasted. Good process builds good policy, builds good politics. But what we find here is we see the other side manipulating, a speaker that manipulates this process. Instead of airing out this aspect in front of the American people, with the American people, for the American people, we decide to unitarily say, we know what's right for America. That's what's wrong about this process. And I've been one of those people that's been equal about that from both sides of the aisle. It's a sad, sad day when we don't uphold the rule of law, when we embrace anarchy. You know, folks, the Democrats have a voice here. Why is it silent? The silence is deafening. I call on the Attorney General, the FBI head, and the President to make sure that law and order is restored. Prosecute people to the fullest degree. Set an example. Make sure people are held accountable, and that way we'll have some law and order. Thank you.
Thank everyone for being here. I thank my colleagues for their passion. You can see how passionate they are about this very important issue right now. And I think we got time for one or two questions.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Reverend Casey Carroll, International Ministry Online. Do you think that the $100 billion that they gave in the Justice Act that was afforded, that the people are aware that this is only 0.3% of the trillions of dollars that was passed, the HERO Act, and that if we look at it, that it was technically going over from the 1985 Efficiency Budget Control Act that repeatedly allowed for trillions of dollars to be spent creating a humongous change for the future of this nation, for all of these millions of Americans that we're talking about?
I appreciate you asking the question. First of all, the HEROES Act was not passed. That was a $3.2 trillion bill sponsored by Speaker Pelosi. That was not passed. But let's just talk about the national debt if you want to. We are sitting over $26 trillion in national debt. That will have implications for this generation, the next generation, the generation follows. And it sounds like you're concerned about it. Everybody in this group is vitally concerned about that. We're concerned about our spending. By my calculation, we're going to be sitting over $28 trillion in national debt by the time of the end of the current fiscal year because Congress has not put its fiscal house in order, and we have to do that. That is an important step, and you're right, we routinely, present company accepted, routinely go over our spending limitations and our spending caps, and that's to the detriment of this nation. One more question.
I have something.
Yeah, hold on one. Let's just take one last question. Yep.
Thank you, sir. I wanted to ask, so we're looking at the Justice and Policing Act today that's been proposed by House Democrats. This is a response to a lot of the protests, some of the violent protests that have been seen so far.
That's not true. This was in response to the George Floyd incident. This has nothing to do with what we've seen since the protests were taken over by the anarchists, Antifa and Black Lives Matter. This particular bill actually has devolved and is a rearguard action to emasculate state and local police agencies. That's what this bill does. And so that's why I think many of my colleagues are really upset about it, and we would like to have seen something where we could have participated in it. When this bill was heard, we offered at least a dozen well thought out amendments, including Mr. Gomert's here. We're dealing with the Emmett Tillman anti-lynching legislation. And his amendment would have made us a life sentence if you lynch somebody. The Democrats were so entrenched, wouldn't let us participate, that they said they would rather keep it as a max 10 years. So when we start looking at this and this particular bill today, this is not a bill in response to the George Floyd incident. This is a bill in response to try to further emasculate state and local police agencies.
Would you be willing to caucus and conference with your Democratic colleagues now on reforming this bill?
We tried. We tried multiple times. We were shut out completely by our colleagues on the other side. And and you get the evidence you saw yesterday where the Democrats voted against Tim Scott's, and as he pointed out, it was because of who sponsored the legislation, not because of the content of that legislation. He was willing to allow them up to 20 amendments to try to work with them. We offered 12 amendments. We didn't get to see the legislation till day before late, and they would not allow us to participate. And I'm not the only one on the Judiciary Committee. that sought participation in that process. I know Representative Gomert. We've got some others here as well, Ranking Member Jordan. So thank you for the question. Thank you all for being here. We'll wrap it up. It's up to them.
Yep.
All right, thanks everybody for coming out. Appreciate it.
Good job.
Good to see you, Alex. Let me trail them for a second. I'll be right back. Sure. Good. Good.
People just don't know. If he did, he would know that actually Jefferson and Washington were not fans of slavery. In fact, if you go back to the original declaration that Jefferson drafted